Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today's a solo episode, and I have a topic I want to dive into. I think it's going to be super interesting. I talked about this on my Q&A episode early in the week, but I wanted to dive into it a bit more. And it's around why I think getting into a calorie deficit every so often is a good idea, even if you are happy with your current body comp. So I'll talk about what all that means here in a minute. But first, before I do that, if you want to learn more about a body recomp, what it is, how to do it, what it is, what it's not, common mistakes, two types of body recomp, which we'll hit on in today's episode, and then 10 things you need for a body recomp. The link to that is in the show notes there. And again, it's completely free, and definitely check it out if you're curious about that. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's topics. Yeah, this is something I've been thinking a lot about recently, and I just haven't really been able to put it into thoughts, and it's around this concept of, to me, there's this benefit when we think from a physiologic standpoint. Your body's going to be in this position where it's building up. And if you want to get super scientific, you can anabolic processes and then breaking down, right? So catabolic processes. And when we look at today's modern environment, most people are in the building up, the anabolic state. And it's not from a muscle building standpoint. It's because when we talk anabolic, that's also where your body's going to store body fat too, because we're building things up. Most people are in this chronic just energy overload. It's always in this building up state. We're never getting our body to have this, to go through these processes that it needs of breaking energy down, breaking stored energy down, and just getting in this place where your body senses an energy deficit. So again, we just come back to energy balance. Most people, they don't ever get into that state anymore, right? And that's more so the modern environment. But I feel like people that don't manage their nutrition, they do that. Now, you see another subset of population where they're overly focused on their body composition, and then they spend too much time in a catabolic state, and their body adapts to that, because your body will adapt to that. It adapts both ways, but it will adapt to that, and that leads to some potential issues. But then you have people that do get in an energy deficit, and they are catabolic, but they're in a catabolic state where it's from overall health standpoint, they go to the extremes. It's not a controlled way. It's usually it's accidental, whether there's a sickness or something like that. But then there's also people that just try to drop body weight or body fat, and they just crash diet. Again, yes, that is good. You are getting in that state of being catabolic, but then at the same time, we're lacking things that our body needs. But then you also have a third set where they feel like they need to be super lean all the time, and now they're chronically under eating, and they're not getting enough into the anabolic phase, the building up phase, right? So you have people all over the spectrum here. So most people are going to listen to this. You're obviously into health and fitness. So it's okay. At some point, you've probably ran a fat loss phase. Maybe it wasn't the greatest, but at the end of the day, you're not going to be the general pop that's okay. You're just eating like crap. You're not exercising, et cetera. You're just in this chronic energy overload. But you could be at the state where maybe you haven't ran a deficit for a while or properly one, or you think, hey, people say you want to avoid being in deficit. So then you never get in it for that specific reason. I think back to myself where when I was trying to get bigger years ago, in my early 20s, I'm now in my mid 30s, I definitely did not get into a deficit for an extended period of time. And I'm sure that because I was just trying to get as big as possible there. So this is where you would potentially run into this. Obviously, if you're at higher body fat percentages or you have physique goals, a calorie deficit is going to be necessary to get leaner. Okay. You're going to need to get into an energy deficit there. We know that. There's no way around that. But what if you're not overly concerned with getting leaner right now? It's you've done that before. Now you've been gaining, or maybe you've been maintaining. What if your current look feels good and you're not really carrying much extra body fat, and you're just you're feeling good, training's going well. Maybe you've dipped into a surplus a little bit, maybe mostly maintenance, but you just haven't been in a deficit, right? If you're at that point, should you still ever intentionally enter a calorie deficit? Okay. I believe you should, from a overall health perspective and long-term metabolic health and long-term physique standpoint. I think you should, even if people say, hey, you want to avoid being in a deficit for extended periods of time. Yes, but that doesn't mean we want to never get into a deficit. I think there's benefits to dipping into different energy. We want to be careful with too large of a deficit for too long, and we want to be careful with being in a deficit for too long as well too. But a surplus is definitely one that we really want to be careful with there, and that's the easiest one to get into. But again, I believe you should run a deficit, not because you need to be lighter or you need to get more shredded, but for the health benefits. And I'm talking long-term health, short-term health, metabolic health, and your physique long-term. And so when and how often should you do it? Because that's going to be the big thing here is, okay, so when and how long do I need to get into a deficit? That's going to depend on a few things. Your current body composition. The leaner you are, shorter it's going to be, the less often you're going to be there, right? Your preferences and goals. So what I mean by that is, what do you have a performance goal right now? Do you have a muscle building goal? That's going to alter that as well too, right? In terms of how often you're going to do this? How long have you been out of a deficit? If you just got out of a deficit 2 months ago, this doesn't apply to you. Like we need to spend more time outside of a deficit. Like, because the big thing I could see, like I can see people overdoing it, right? That's the key thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to overdo it. So I could see now where I've spent time telling people, hey, we need to eat enough. And now I come out with this and it's, oh, cool. So I can go to deficit more often. So unfortunately, I feel like for the people that are going to need this, it might go over their head. And the people that don't need to do a deficit more often, this is going to be their like, oh, hey, cool. I can go into a deficit more often, so again, if you're on the leaner side, you have long-term physique goals and you want to build some muscle and maybe you're really like you enjoy performance side of things and you want to feel good and you just got out of a deficit 2 months ago, it's like we have to wait way longer for this, right? But if your body composition is like, it's not bad, but it's not the greatest it's ever been. I've gained a little bit of body fat here in this building phase. I do ultimately want to improve my physique. I don't have any current performance goals right now. Again, maybe I'm not necessarily concerned with maximizing muscle growth to the absolute maximum. And I've been out of a deficit for over a year. This is where this would apply to you. Okay. That's more so what I'm trying to get at here. So that's who this would apply to the most. So again, the key here is to not overdo this. This is not an excuse to go build for a month or two, gain a bunch of weight and then deficit, right? That is not what I would want somebody to take from this. It's maybe you get to your, like you fat loss diet at multiple times, you've done a couple building phase and you feel really good with your current physique. And it's just, I just feel good. I just want to feel like I feel good and I'm not overly, it's like at some point, I think you need to dip into a deficit there. That's more so who I'm speaking with. So at the end of the day, like for most people, most of my clients, I'm saying no more than 3 to 6 months in a deficit per year. And in many cases, ideally, we're going to get you to even less than that. But I'm definitely saying no more than 3 to 6 months. That would be the maximum. And then ideally, maybe we're doing 3 to 6 months every 18 to 24 months or something like that, or potentially even longer. Again, if you're doing all the things, like if you're weight training, you're eating well, you're not seeing your scale weight come up too quickly, or maybe it's staying around the same and you're sleeping well, all those things. Again, you're going to expand your runway here to where you don't necessarily need to do this as often. And so now I'm going to go into like why I'm personally cutting right now. So I'm in a fat loss phase. It's been over 18 months since I've done a prolonged cut. Since I've been in an energy deficit for an extended period of time. And I obviously, like, I do want to see some more leanness. Like, who doesn't? Like, that's always a fun thing to see. More abs, maybe more veins, just shreds in general. But that's not the main reason I'm doing it at this point, right? And so, because in this build, I really did not gain much fat, and that was on purpose with kind of my views on how we should do building phases and just in terms of like long-term health and what's best for that and just physique in general. Just felt like the days of really pushing a surplus are over for me. And I've talked about this a lot recently. And so in this build, I didn't gain a ton of weight. I didn't push my weight as high as I had in the past. And I felt good and I felt like things were going well. Now, again, within that, I had to threw a wrench into things and you just have to work around. And maybe I was like for me, I definitely didn't want to be in a surplus, too large of a surplus during that time, just because again, I wasn't like the inputs were not there for me to warrant being in a large surplus. And so for me, it's like I could have stayed there. Like I could have stayed there, but I was like, man, it's been 18 months. What I know about human physiology, I feel like I need to dip into a cut here. And I've noticed a few non-aesthetic benefits when I go through a well-planned deficit. And I think more people need to consider these. And I'm going to go over what those are here in a minute. But so that's the main reason, right? It's like, yes. So essentially the thing is like from a fat loss diet perspective, if you feel good, do you need a fat loss diet? And again, I don't think you need to right this second, but I do think at some time you need to, and for these health benefits, right? So first, reason being lower resting heart rate equals better recovery. Every time I drop some body fat, my resting heart rate dips too. So that means one, less cardiovascular strain, right? Better parasympathetic tone. So like rest and recover is better, right? So overall recovery is going to be better. So less strain on your body. Okay. So again, when we think long-term health, that makes sense, right? So to me, again, it makes sense to slow things down of always constantly feeding our body maintenance higher and hey, let's back off the food intake a little bit, right? I'm sure it's a combination of the deficit and the fat loss that this happens. And because of that, there's improved recovery between workouts and even during sleep. In general, your recovery is just going to be better. There's going to be less strain on your body when we are in a deficit for periods of time and when we do drop a little bit of body fat, right? Second, a reset for habits. Dialing in intake for a fat loss phase often for me and what I see with clients is it resets your structure almost in a way. Everything just becomes more intentional, right? You become more aware of like mindless snacking and poor food choices. So for me, it's like when I get into a fat loss phase, it's like, all right, I just need to be smarter with my choices that maybe I started to let go down a little bit, right? I feel like when you're eating more calories, you start to let more and more tasty foods slip in, which is not a bad thing. That kind of resets like your like anytime we start to give ourselves like more like pleasure, like that kind of raises your standard for it. And so you just want to keep going higher and higher, right? I think it's like climbing the hedonic stairs or something like that. I don't know. And so same thing kind of happens, right? Where it's, man, I'm starting to like want tasty food, expect it, want it multiple times a day. And so it cleans things up from that perspective. And then to me, anytime I've done a fat loss phase, the discipline bleeds into other areas, right? Sleep, training, mindset work, everything that I do, it just bleeds into that. And I've seen that happen a lot of times with clients too. Again, I think it can be a good reset from that standpoint. The third, and this is more physiological, that was more psychological, is tapping into stored energy. So if you've been eating at maintenance or above for a while, your body's used to just constant food coming in. We're in that building up state that I was talking about. A deficit's going to shift your system towards using more stored energy, right? So again, your body fat, if we're doing it right, more effectively. And we're going to get into those catabolic processes more. And again, I think that's good to do that every once in a while. You don't need to do it all the time, but I think there's some benefits of doing that. And again, it can be a healthy shift if you haven't done it for a while. Again, because we want to use that, right? Like I feel like if we don't ever dip into those, your body's not as good at doing that over time. It's a process that is important, and we need to make sure that we get there at some point in time. So again, we're tapping into stored energy, which obviously is a good thing, and that's obviously going to help us drop body fat, but that's good to rely on your stored energy for energy at times. Next would be like the mental resilience and awareness side of things. So the biggest thing being hunger, right? Learning how to manage hunger and be okay with it and push through just builds resilience. And it's just a valuable skill to develop, to be okay with being hungry. A lot of issues of people like with fat loss, like any sort of hunger is like this signal of, holy crap, I have to eat now. That should not be the case. If you feel like you have to eat all the time throughout the day, this is where this could potentially benefit you there from an overall health and metabolic health standpoint. Like we need to improve, but then also again, mentally too, I think we just get used to having food all the time, and it's any little bit of hunger is a problem, and we feel like it's a life or death situation, when really we should be able to go extended periods of time without eating. If we're in a resilient place and we're in good metabolic, we should be able to go extended periods of time without eating. That is a skill that we should have and we need to learn. And part of it's the mental side of things, but then also, like I said, the physiological side of things as well too, that can be improved. But people that weight train, etc., like you have solid body composition. And if you can't do this, I think it's more mental than anything. So it helps you with that. It helps you manage that hunger. And that's a good thing, right? That's always one of my favorite, but not my favorite benefits, but it's like, hey, I'm hungry. This is a good thing. I need to do this and I need to practice this because I should be able to go extended periods of time without eating. Next, better health markers. Calorie deficit is going to help improve fasting, glucose, insulin, triglycerides, blood pressure. And so again, even small amounts of fat loss have been shown to meaningfully impact these markers, especially paired with movement, good sleep, nutrient-dense foods, etc. So again, we can start to see a little bit of an improvement in our overall health markers as well too. Now, obviously, as you're going from higher body fats to lower, this is definitely going to happen, but I still think you can see some benefits every once in a while to getting into a deficit because these things will also improve there. It's a controlled stressor on the body, a good stressor on the body. A deficit is a stressor, but if managed well, it's a hormetic stressor, right? So small dose that makes the system stronger. Like it's going to make your body stronger by doing this. And this is especially true the longer you have been out of a deficit and the higher your body fat percentage is. Again, I think the longer that you have been out of a deficit, this is going to be a good stressor on the body. Now, the more often you're in a deficit, the leaner you are. This may not be the best stressor on your body. So it teaches your body, how to adapt. The key, though, is keeping your total stress load in check, right? So prioritizing sleep, adjusting training volume and intensity, avoiding crash diets and large deficits for too long. This is, again, where people are like, deficit's bad, you should not be in a deficit at all, or hey, you shouldn't do fasted training, all these things. But what's important is your total stress load on the body. Yeah, for someone who get terrible sleep, they're also training a ton, super intensely. Their circadian rhythms all out of whack. They already have a ton of stress outside. Like these things are now we have too many stressors on the body, and we need to get those dialed in, and we need to manage like the stressors that we are putting on the body there. So again, the key though is it can be a positive stressor if we're managing our overall stress load and through all those things that I talked about. It can lower inflammation, right? So deficit can lower inflammation levels. Many people notice better digestion, less bloating, and improved energy even before major weight changes show up on the scale. So you just feel better overall, right? You feel less inflamed when you get into a deficit for a period of time. On the note of digestion, I've seen it go both ways. If we do it right and we're in a good spot to do a deficit, it should improve your digestion, right? Now, what can potentially happen is you may see things slow down a little bit in terms of you may not like a little bit more like constipation sometimes, or maybe you're just not going as frequently or as much, but that's typically from just less food coming in. But again, if we manage it, we take care of sleep, stress management, eat the right foods, you really shouldn't see that happen in a deficit. And improve metabolic flexibility. So metabolic flexibility is your body's ability to switch between burning carbs and fat depending on what situation you're in. If you've been constantly fed, especially in a surplus, your body may get less efficient at burning fat for fuel, not the same as losing body fat, but using fat for fuel, which you do want to do. If you just use carbohydrates for energy, that's not great. You want your body to use fat as an energy source. Again, that's not you losing body fat, because again, to lose body fat, you need to be in a deficit, but to use fat as fuel, that you want to be there. And a lot of people struggle with that if they're metabolically inflexible. A calorie deficit can improve this flexibility by increasing resilience on stored fat and improving insulin sensitivity, which can help energy levels, appetite regulation, and long-term body comp as well too. So again, a deficit shouldn't always be about getting shredded. Sometimes it's just a smart short-term phase to optimize how your body works, especially when it's well-timed. The key though is, one, we don't want a fat loss to diet. This isn't an excuse to calorie deficit all the time to just lose body fat and stay leaner because you're scared of eating more food. Overly aggressive diets plus lack of macros and food quality will backfire on you in this. So we have to be smart about it. This isn't just a, hey, I'm going to be random about it. We need to be strategic with it. And you need to manage the overall stress load on your body in this process. That's the key part of it. If we're not sleeping well, we're doing these things that I talked about. We're also trying to do a ton of training with it. We have a lot of like life stress going on. This is not the right time to do it. You need to make sure you're in a good spot, especially if you're the avatar that I talked about initially. Now, again, if you're someone who's overweight and you need to drop some body fat, that is a stressor on the body. So we need to figure out, with everything else you have going on, is now the right time to drop body fat and apply that good stressor to the body. But somebody who's already fairly, like you've been lifting, you've lost like the majority of your body fat that you want to lose, and you feel good in your physique, this is the person that, like, we need to be smart with this. We don't just want to do this at any time. It has to be the right time. So in my example, again, I felt good overall. But for me, when we had our son back in September, that was not the time to do a deficit, right? Yes, I hadn't been in a deficit for over a year at that point, but again, that is not the time to fat loss diet for my particular avatar. That would backfire because the overall stress load on the body is high, right? I'm not getting good sleep, probably a bit more stressed. So all those things, like we need to, so that would not be a good time there. So that gives you an example of when you don't want to use this there. So a couple other thoughts I have on this is, could some of these benefits that I'm talking about here, like obviously you're not going to lose body fat here, but could you, in a phase where you're doing maintenance calories or small surplus, and again, you're in a building phase at that point, it depends on what the goal is of your building phase, I think it would be part of this, but could you benefit from some sort of time restricted eating, which I think in general, that is a good practice to have. Obviously, when we're trying to gain muscle, we want to have, I don't think you should go anywhere under, at the minimum, 8 hours of feeding, but 12, right? If we want to get some benefits of time restricted eating, I think 8 to 12 is perfect there. But again, if our goal is to build muscle, like we want to be on the higher end of that, and we definitely don't want to go under 8 hours. But I wonder if you're in that phase and you do these short-term energy deficits, time restricted eating, daily fasts, or even like cardio, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute, would that negate you needing to get into a deficit for the reasons I explained? Obviously, if we want to drop body fat, we need to be in a calorie deficit. But if your goal isn't necessarily body fat loss, and it's just to get some of these health benefits that I'm talking about, could you potentially get these from these shorter term energy restriction? But again, as a whole, if we're trying to gain muscle or again, maintain our body weight and be at maintenance calories or higher, we need to make sure the overall intake is at that energy balance. The issue becomes, when you do these things, then it may be harder to do those things, right? So you have to weigh the pros and cons of that. So could you potentially get the benefits I talked about by doing that? Maybe. But let's say you did get a little bit of a benefit from it, and then you didn't negate the need to get into an extended fat loss side if you don't want to do it. But how's that going to impact the muscle building side of things long term and your performance? And so it may, because you're going to be in a short-term energy deficit, right? So those are just things we need to consider and thoughts I have. I'm not saying that is right or wrong. Again, if anybody listens to this and they have any thoughts, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can shoot me a message over on Instagram, HOEHN_. And then when I say cardio activates AMPK, which leads to, again, it's the opposite of mTOR, right? Which is an anabolic process. By you doing these activities like that, that help negate? Obviously, it's going to help with the resting heart rate. It's going to help with better recovery, right? It's going to help with insulin sensitivity, doing like movement and cardio in general. This is like the advanced part of it, and just thoughts I have with it. For me, how do I practice this? I try to eat within a 12-hour eating window during my building phases, and I'm doing cardio, right? Like conditioning. So maybe I'm already getting the benefits and I got most of them, and it negates some of these benefits that I talked about of being in a prolonged energy deficit, right? So some things to ponder there. And again, if anybody has any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. But that's it for me. That's it for this episode. I hope this was super helpful. Again, if you have any questions, reach out to me on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active on social media. And then if you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find it. That's it for this episode. I'll talk to you guys soon.